John Spytek's son wants the Raiders to draft Ashton Jeanty. I feel like if I was John Spytek, this is what I would do.
Oh my God! Dominic out of the ring! I told you!
Now, in all seriousness, that's all jokes. Don't take it too seriously. It seems like John Spytek's son does want the Raiders to get Ashton Jeanty, and he's telling his dad that he needs to draft them this year, or else he might leave the family.
Yeah, my oldest son has made it no secret that if we don't pick Ashton Jeanty at 6, that he's walking out of the family and he's going to find somebody else. Probably whoever takes Ashton. I think he's motivated.
He's a free agent for fandom right now.
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
Yeah, Jack is motivated by fantasy football and touchdowns in fantasy football, not necessarily all of team building. But I love that my son loves the draft process at 10 years old, and maybe he's starting to fall in love with the scouting process. I hate it a little bit too because I know the life that he's signing up for, but the passion that he has. And he walked right into our building and basically told Mark Davis, like, if my dad doesn't take Ashton Jeanty, he's doing a bad job.
Is he in there buzzing film with you when you're watching Jeanty?
No, he goes on YouTube and he watches it himself. So,
I love it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, Jack, those are highlights. You know, you got to watch all the plays.
Complete game.
Yeah, don't be swayed by highlights.
John, you were talking about culture earlier.
Who's your source, by the way?
That's funny.
Your agent.
Okay.
I was also with the same agency,
okay.
So we have the same agent. You just didn't know that until now.
Sean.
Of course, Ashton Jeanty has been the #1 favorite pick for the Raiders at number 6, especially knowing that the Raiders have a huge need at the running back position. You guys know my feelings about this. I'm not going to keep talking about it. I just feel like there's so many options in this year's draft to go out and get a running back, let alone a generational running back that could come in and start for the next couple of years. Would it hurt to get Ashton Jeanty? No. Of course not. But just like all these other players, man, Ashton Jeanty does have his weakness as well. And I would feel kind of dumb if the Raiders got Ashton Jeanty, but then there's a second round running back that goes to another team that puts up about the same numbers, if not better, and we could have just used that pick on another need for the team. Now, even though I am opposed to getting Ashton Jeanty, I wouldn't be too mad if they were to get him. But I wanted to give you guys 5 running backs in this year's draft that the Raiders could get in the second round or even later that I feel confident in that could be an RB1 in the NFL and could be productive just as much as Ashton Jeanty. Now, my #1 running back would be Travion Henderson. I've talked a lot about him, and I believe that Henderson is the complete back. Everything that you can ask for out of a running back is in the pass blocking game. If anything, he's one of the best blocking running backs in this year's class, and Ashton Jeanty struggles with that. Now, the only real knock that I have against Henderson, and one of the main reasons why he might not be taken, earlier on, is for the fact that he split carries with Quinshon Judkins over there at Ohio State. But that also can be a good thing because there's not a lot of mileage behind him on those legs. So all in all, I do believe that Henderson could be just as productive, if not better, than Ashton Jeanty at the next level. But I know a lot of people are going to kill me for that. It's all good. I'll just take it. And he's a guy that you could get later on, maybe second, even third, and that would be a steal for this team. Another running back is easily Omarion Hampton, a guy that can do it all as well. He's a guy that's going to be taken late in the first round, maybe even be there in the second round, and that would be a huge steal for the Raiders as well. Now, Devin White, I've talked about him a lot, and he's going to be a guy that I could see going later on compared to all the running backs I'm going to bring to you guys today. Coming out of a small school, coming out of Kansas, not a lot of people know about him. But coming out of college reminds me so much of Dalvin Cook. He does everything in the backfield as well. Doesn't have the long speed. Outside of all of that, if you're looking for a running back that could take over and the Raiders don't have to give up too much draft capital to get him, he would be my guy later on, third and on. Then, of course, you got Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee and Caleb Johnson. Those are 5 running backs that I do believe that could have somewhat of the same production in the NFL, if not could be better than Ashton Jeanty, and you wouldn't have to select them at number 6 overall. But again, that's just my opinions, y'all. Now, another guy that is kind of really high on Ashton Jeanty is former Raiders GM Mike Mayock. Now, according to an article by Raiders Wire, Mike Mayock names the 5 perfect fits for the Raiders in this year's draft. If there's anything that we know about Mike Mayock, he is draft savvy. Now, I know that the years that he was with the Raiders, we haven't really done well in the first round, and most of that can be in due part because of John Gruden and him being a bad evaluator of talent, especially in the first round. We We wasted a lot of draft picks. Cleveland Ferrell, Jonathan Abram, Henry Ruggs, Damon Arnett, Alex Leatherwood, just to name a few, or just to name them all. The only one that actually worked out in the first round was Josh Jacobs. But Mike Mayock was recently asked in an interview with Betway Insider about what would be his ideal selection for the Raiders at 6th overall. He leaned in on his experience when he and Gruden selected Josh Jacobs in the first round for what he thinks Pete Carroll should do, saying, "We drafted Josh Jacobs there, which was kind of a perfect fit for John Gruden and what he wanted to do. I think Ashton Jeanty from Boise State would be an ideal fit for what Pete Carroll wants to do. In Seattle, Pete always ran the football downhill, physical, used play action with Russell Wilson. That was their identity, and I love the Ashton Jeanty fit there." And like I stated before, this is one of the many reasons why the Raider Nation really wants and is in love with Ashton Jeanty at number 6. If this was any other draft that was not filled with a lot of running backs, you look at last year's draft class, it wasn't really a strong running back draft class, and I would definitely understand this. But like I stated, this draft is filled with so much great running back talent that we could get later on in the draft, which is why I'm opposed to getting him in the first round. But that being said, though, he also mentioned 4 other additional fits that the Raiders can at least address in the second round as well, saying they've got a wideout need. Emeka Egbuka or Luther Burden, one of those 2 guys might be there at 37. They also got beat up a little bit in free agency in the defensive backfield, so they could use a corner. Azure Thomas out of Florida State is a guy that I'm probably higher on than most people. And Trey Amos from Ole Miss are 2 logical guys who will be sitting there at 37. Now, honestly, if Egbuka or even Luther Burden was sitting there at number 37, then I definitely pick him up easily as a wide receiver, and that would be a huge steal for this team. I just don't see him being there, but anything can happen in the NFL draft. Same can be said for Thomas and Amos. If they're sitting there at number 37, I can definitely see the Raiders possibly picking them up, knowing that we do need more cornerback depth on this defense. Now, I know that the same can be said if the Raiders were to address the wide receiver position in the first round, getting T-Mac. We could still address another running back in the second round at 37, or get somebody else, an offensive lineman, or even quarterback. So with that said, that's one of the main reasons why I do feel like this draft, there's going to be so much different options for the Raiders, and the fact that the Raiders already addressed the quarterback position, one of the more important positions in this offseason, gives the Raiders so much flexibility to go and select the best player available for them. And I feel like the more hype that the Raider Nation puts around Ashton Jeanty, it might not actually come true, because most of the time when Raider fans, us fans, want a certain guy, it just never pans out, or the Raiders skip on them and don't draft them. Heck, the same can be said about Shedeur Sanders, who ironically could be falling down in this year's draft. According to Adam Schefter on his podcast, this is what he had to say about the Colorado quarterback.
It certainly feels like the Cleveland Browns are inclined to look elsewhere aside from quarterback. And it's starting to feel like the New York Giants at number 3 are starting to look elsewhere other than quarterback. So if the Browns don't take Shedeur Sanders at 2, and if the Giants don't take Shedeur Sanders at 3, and that is the feel that I'm getting recently, where is Shedeur Sanders going?
And if that were to happen, which I do believe could possibly happen, I do believe the number 1 team to get him would be the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, I know that getting a quarterback is not the number 1 ideal position for the Raiders in the first round, especially after getting Geno Smith. But if you're thinking about the future, I think that he's the guy. Now, I know a lot of people have been talking about not thinking about the future, thinking about right now. And I understand that point as well. If you don't want to get the guy for the future in the first round, that's totally fine. Go into the draft and get somebody else. Then that would leave the Raiders with either getting Will Johnson, Mason Graham, or one of these offensive linemen. And I do believe realistically that's what most likely will happen in the first round. Whether I want T-Mac, whether the Raider Nation wants Ashton Jeanty, or even Shedeur Sanders, I think the Raiders are going to go address a different need. And knowing what Pete Carroll did in his first go around with the Seahawks, his first overall pick, or his first ever draft, he addressed the offensive line with his first pick. With that said, though, Raider Nation, I know how much you guys love Ashton Jeanty and how much you guys want Ashton Jeanty to be on this team, and I wouldn't mind it as well. But hypothetically speaking, if Ashton Jeanty wasn't there at number 6 and the Raiders were to go into a different direction at the running back position, who would be your top choice and what round would you guys select that running back in? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Now, some other news, I guess some sad news amongst the Raider Nation. It seems as if the Raiders will not be going to Napa Valley this offseason for training camp. According to Vic Tafer, he tweeted out that it doesn't seem like training camp in Napa is going to happen after all. Raiders gave it a shot. And when asked for any explanation about this or quote, he simply said, nah, they can explain that later. Now, I know a lot of Raider fans are really looking forward to the Raiders going back to Napa for training camp. I think it would have been cool. I know that the Raiders went to Costa Mesa last year to go to SoCal, and that didn't really pan out for this team. And it kind of sucked because of all the restrictions that was placed on them. But thinking about the Raiders going back to Napa, of course, a lot of fans from the Bay Area, from NorCal, were all excited, especially kind of taking, a trip back to memory lane. Seeing the Raiders back in Napa would have been pretty cool. I was even thinking about making a trip to go to Napa just to go attend and just to go and hang out and see the vibes over there. I was able to go to Napa one time before, and that was in 2019, the last time that they were there when they were shooting Hard Knocks. I was able to go there. Shout out to one of the Usos that hooked your boy up with a ticket. But other than that, I was actually going to plan to go there. But now it seems like it's not going to happen, and they most likely will be staying here in Las Vegas, which I guess is good for me because I don't have to go travel anywhere. But again, I just thought I'd just give you guys this news because it came out over the weekend. The last thing I want to kind of touch up on is Devin White's contract details. Kind of got leaked, I guess. According to Spytek, it seems like Devin White signed with the Raiders on a one-year deal worth about $1 million with absolutely no guarantees. God damn. Talk about making a deal. Coupon John and Pete Carroll at it again, man, with the huge deals. If this is actually true, which I think it is true, this is a huge steal for the Raiders to get somebody of Devin White's caliber. Yes, I know he hasn't been the same these past couple of years, but to get him out a 1 year, $1 million deal, that's crazy. Definitely what you would call a really low risk, high reward type of deal for the Raiders, which I'm really excited about because all he can do is go up. And knowing that the Raiders linebacker room right now could use any type of talent and could use any type of spark, I think this is good for the Raiders and good for Devin White. Well, I'm not gonna say good for Devin White, but mostly good for the Raiders. And if he comes out and shows out this year, then it'll look like one of the greatest signings during the offseason, which I'm really excited about now going into the season. And if he does ball out, we'll have to revisit this, and he might cost a little bit more next year when we have to start talking about contracts. But with that said though, Raider Nation, what are your thoughts on this Devin White contract? And also, what are your thoughts on everything else? Let me know down in the comments below. Until the next video, this is your boy Simone Raider, and your boy is, yeah.